Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing my favorite dark romances. Alright guys, so my friend Becky over at Bex Reads asked if I would like to be part of a collab along with a bunch of other amazing booktubers where we share our favorite dark romance reads. I absolutely love dark romance. While I love fantasy romance, that is by far my absolute favorite genre. Dark romance is a close second. So I have a bunch of other dark romance rec videos, including a dark fantasy romance rec video that I will leave down in the description below. And also make sure to check out everybody else's dark romance rec videos once you're finished watching this one. But I have so many exciting dark romances to talk about. I am so excited for this video. So with that being said, if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon, all linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about these dark romances. Starting off with one of my top reads of the year, we have Hills of Shivers and Shadows by Pam Godwin. This is both one of the darkest and best books that I've ever read. This book haunts me. There are some scenes in this book that I kind of wish I could purge from my brain, but overall, this book is a masterpiece. So in the story, we are following Frankie, and she ends up being abducted and held captive by these four men in this remote Alaskan cabin. And she has to survive a brutal winter along with these men and kind of find out about their loyalties. And as she starts to uncover their past and learn more about them, she realizes that there is this dark, manipulative driving force behind everything. And it's really just Frankie trying to survive. And I loved this book. I cried like a baby at the very end of this book. I will say, this is one of the darkest books on this list. It will not be for everybody. Please check trigger warnings. There are some very upsetting graphic things that happen on page in detail. So this is not for the faint of heart, but if you're okay with the triggers, I do think this is an amazing read, and I'm eagerly anticipating the sequel to come out via audio. And next up is Even If It Hurts by Sam Mariano. Now, it has been quite a while since I read this book, but I vividly remember it being nothing like what I was expecting and it being super dark and super twisty. So this is set in high school, which is why I was kind of leery about picking this up. However, it was still super dark, and I absolutely love this. I will say the main male character, you are going to question his motives throughout this entire book, and I'm pretty sure at the end you still aren't exactly sure where his loyalties lie. But in this story, we are following this girl, and I'm pretty sure her mother is dying, and she is just trying to get through high school with as little drama as possible. So she ends up angering the wrong super popular girl, and because of this, she gets thrown onto Dare's radar. Now, Dare is this super popular guy at this high school who is also a little bit of a socio and psychopath, and it's their romance, and it goes from there. So, highly, highly recommend. I definitely need to pick up more Sam Mariano in the future. I've heard very good things about her other books, so I will definitely be picking up some soon. Next up is Debt by Nina G. Jones. This book was a crazy roller coaster. I read it in one sitting. It's super dark, but so, so good, and you will have no idea what is coming next. So in this story, we are following a girl who wants to have a little bit of excitement in the bedroom, so she hires somebody to essentially break in and fulfill a certain fantasy. Well, that ends up happening, and she's very excited until the next day, where someone else breaks in, and it turns out to be the guy that she actually hired. So who is the first person that night? And the story goes from there. I know that doesn't give you a lot to go off in terms of the plot of this book, but it just gets even more wild from there. It is so, so good. Once again, for all of these books, please check trigger warnings. There is a very upsetting scene that happens at the end of this book that I kind of wish I was a little bit more prepared for, but overall, such an original and good read. And next up is one of my absolute favorite dark Gothic why choose romances. It is Heartless, Heathens by Santana Knox. So the story has a lot of nods to The Hunchback of Notre Dame. So in this story, the church has taken over the government. So we are following Father Frollo, who's the head of Notre Dame University, and it is controlled by the church. So Father Frollo's most prized possession is Romina, this girl that he has hidden away in a bell tower because of her sins. Well, Father Frollo's world is about to be turned upside down because these three heathens show up ready to cause chaos at this university, and they immediately end up finding Romina and take her into their world where they show her the darker side of life, and it goes from there. I love this book so much. It is so good. Check trigger warnings. It is super dark. There's a lot of like occult magic and things like that, but I just loved Romina as a character and her romances with the different guys, and the spice is top tier. So please, if you have not read this yet and you like dark Why Choose Romance, you need to pick this book up. And next up is The Sinner's Duet by Sophie Lark. This is one of my favorite duets by this author. I pretty much love everything Sophie Lark writes, but this was such a standout. So the story is following Cole, and he is a sculptor, a very famous sculptor, but he is also a notorious serial killer. So one day, another serial killer ends up leaving this girl named Mara as a gift for him, and Cole immediately becomes very intrigued by Mara. So instead of killing her like is intended, he ends up offering her a job at his studio because she is a painter, and it's their romance, and it is so good. There's a bunch of action, and you also never really know Cole's motives. What is he gonna do with Mara? Is he actually interested in her? Does he have the capacity to love? Or is he gonna end up, or is she gonna end up being one of his next victims? And it goes from there. Highly, highly recommend. This is probably, it's crazy to say this is one of the least dark books on this list because this book is pretty dark, but this is probably one of the lesser dark books when it comes to all of the books I'm about to recommend. So a really good one for beginners, but I really, really enjoyed this, so highly recommend. And next up is yet another book by Pam Godwin. It is Deliver. This is the first book in a very, very, very dark romance series. Check every trigger. It is one of the darkest series I have read. But in this story, we are following this woman who had a very upsetting past, and she ends up kind of stalking this young man and eventually capturing him, hoping to train him and sell him to an intended buyer. Now, once she starts to train this young man named Josh, she realizes that she's really struggling to do this, and her motivations we slowly find out throughout this, and it goes from there. It's very hard to describe this book without giving away spoilers, but all of the books, I've read the first 3 books in this series, and I've really enjoyed them. They were way different than I was expecting going into it, and probably the summary I gave you isn't really giving you a really good grasp of what the story is about, but I feel like this is a book it's better to go into slightly blind because of the revelations you get throughout the book while reading it. But overall, I did really enjoy this, but it is not for the weak. Once again, please check trigger warnings. And next up is one of my absolute favorite reads on this list. It is Fear Me, Love Me. Now, this book is wild. It is based off of Labyrinth, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. So I knew I was gonna love this book, but just go in knowing it is bonkers. It is one of the most bonkers books I've ever read, but in the best possible way. So this story is following this young woman who is desperate to save her baby brother, and in doing so, she falls into the clutches of Tyrant Mercer. And now, after her family essentially kick her out, she has to navigate Tyrant Mercer and all of his like crazy shenanigans, because he essentially runs this town that she is living in. And it is their romance, and once again, I just want to emphasize how insane this book is, but in the best possible way. So please, if you read this book because of my recommendation, let me know what you think. I have had a few of my friends try this. One of them hated it, the other one actually really had a fun time with it. So I really love this book. And next up is another recent read. It is Graves by Katelyn Taylor. This one also is not super, super dark while still being a stalker kind of serial killer romance. So in this story, we are following this girl who, unbeknownst to her, is being stalked by this guy named Zayden, who is absolutely obsessed with her. And when this guy goes to assault our main character, Zayden ends up stopping him, but ends up in jail because of this. Once again, the male-female character has no idea any of this is going on. So anyway, Zayden ends up asking his twin brother, hey, can you look after my angel? I need to make sure that she is protected. So the brother has no idea what he's talking about, but when he finds this girl, he also becomes completely infatuated and obsessed with her and starts to stalk her as well until he actually makes his presence known and they start a bit of a relationship. And then Xaden gets out of prison. And there's a whole messy situation coming from that. So it goes from there. But I really enjoyed this book. It was a really fun time. I think I ended up rating it like 3.75, 4 stars. So if you are somewhat new to dark romance, this is probably another really good place to start. And I feel like anytime I do a dark romance rec video, I have to include Enslaved by Giana Darling. This is a bind-up of a duet. It is one of the first books that actually made me gasp out loud while I was reading it, wondering, is this book too dark for me? Because it is very, very dark. So the story is following this girl named Cosma, and she is an aspiring model. She's very beautiful. At the start of this, I believe she has just turned 18 years old, and she really loves her family, besides her father, who is a deadbeat and has a horrible gambling addiction. And it gets so bad that he ends up selling Cosma to this British lord. So Cosma ends up waking up naked, chained to a floor in this Gothic mansion, and standing above her is this British lord who says that he is now her master, and the story goes from there. So it is dark. It is super, super dark, but I did absolutely love Cosma as a character, and I loved the romance in this. I will say I like the first book a little bit more than book 2, but there is a ton of action throughout the series. You will fly through this duet. I think I read both books in 2 days, and they are quite long, but this is one of my favorite dark romances. And next up is one of the very first dark romance books I ever read. It is Sicko by Amo Jones. It is unbelievably hard to describe the plot of this book without giving away spoilers, but essentially it is a foster sibling motorcycle club dark romance. And at the beginning of the story, we are introduced to these foster siblings that are both teenagers, and you can tell they have a bit of a crush on each other. However, one day the girl wakes up and her brother, her foster brother, has completely gone missing and has just disappeared. Well, then we fast forward and the brother is now an adult and he is the head of this motorcycle club, and he ends up going to this club where there's some spicy things happening, and he ends up almost sleeping with his foster sister, and things go from there. It turns out there have been some pretty horrible things that have been going on while he has been absent, and it is just a crazy, dark, wild ride. Please, please, once again, check all of the trigger warnings. Very, very dark things happen both on page and are implied, and I will say Amo Jones is one of my favorite authors. She will leave you guessing. I just love how twisty her writing is, so highly, highly recommend. And last up, before I get into the dark romance recs that I have not read yet but want to get to soon, we have the classic Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. This book was unbelievably popular back when I was first starting BookTube, and it is one of my absolute favorite dark romances. I will say I do prefer this first book to the second book. The second book is a little bit too dark for me, but overall the duet is perfection. So in this story, we are following Addie, and she has recently moved into her grandmother's kind of like dilapidated and scary house. And when she gets there, she starts feeling like she is being watched, only she does not realize she is actually being watched by Xaden, who is this vigilante stalker who has become absolutely obsessed with Addie, and it is their romance, and it is so good, but so dark. And I will say the second book deals a lot more with some heavier topics, such as trafficking and things like that. It's just very, very dark. So know that going into it, but it is such a solid dark romance. So if you are new to dark romance and you want to try it out, I feel like this is also a pretty good place to start. I feel like this is a lot of people's first dive into the dark romance genre. And the last 3 books on this list are dark romances that I have not read yet, but want to get to very soon. So first up we have Sick, F-U-X. I'm pretty sure this book isn't available on Amazon anymore because of how dark it is. So all I know about this, I'm pretty sure it's inspired by Alice in Wonderland, but we're following these 2 friends that because of the cruelty of others, they have been separated and have lived pretty terrible lives, and then they end up reconnecting. And together, I think they're trying to get vengeance on the people that wronged them. And I've heard this is unbelievably dark and unbelievably twisted, but I still really, really want to give it a try. So this is another book that I definitely want to pick up at some point before the end of the year. And next up is Crybaby by Monica James. I actually picked this up at a Polycon just because I thought the cover was so unique and really cool. So I'm guessing this also might have Alice in Wonderland vibes, but from what I gathered reading the plot synopsis, we're following this teenage boy named Rev who lives in this very prestigious town, but he sees himself as kind of like the big bad wolf. He steals from the rich and it seems like he sleeps with the housewives of the people he is stealing from. And then one day he ends up meeting this girl that he becomes very intrigued by, and it's their romance. And I think it's really him bringing her into his darker side of the world. So it's a very short read. So once again, I'm really hoping to get to this in October. And last up is a book that honestly I might regret reading. I am very nervous. However, I already purchased the audiobook, so I will be reading this book in October, no matter what. So it is The Wild by K. Webster. I honestly have no idea what this book is about besides the fact that it is set in a remote cabin and that it is very, very taboo and very dark. But I will say, I just looked at the plot synopsis. It didn't give me a lot to go off of, but the warning at the end says, "The Wild is an extremely taboo story. Most will find that the themes in this book will make you incredibly uncomfortable. This book is only for the brave, the open-minded, and the ones who crave love in even the most dismal of situations. Extreme blank themes and violence in certain scenes could trigger emotional distress are found in this story. If you are sensitive to heavy taboo themes, then this story is not for you." So I don't know if I'm going to end up finishing this book, but I am intrigued enough to start it. So I will be picking up The Wild in October. If you have read this, let me know. Do you think this is a good idea, or am I making a mistake? Alright guys, those are some of my favorite dark romance books. Once again, this is a collab, so please make sure to check out everybody else's videos that I'll have linked down in the description below. And I'd like to say a very special thank you to my Paladin protectors, Amanda, Erin, Leslie, Kat, and Lotta. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!